I just learned in speaking to her that she comes from a place which was the gift of the Reds after having taken it from the Whites, I suppose.
In the Civil War,
1918?
18, yeah.
So really in the beginning of the Civil War?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and this is close to Sochi, and it's a region of snowbirds. You all know what snowbirds are?
No.
You know?
I heard you say something about this, but I don't
Snowbirds are retired people who have had enough of the cold, and they migrate south.
Many Swedes do the same.
Yeah,
Ukraine.
sure.
Yeah.
And if they have enough of good governance in Krasnodar, maybe we will migrate there. But anyway, Marina, welcome here.
Thank you very much, yes. Thank you very much. I'm really thrilled to be here, and thank you for the invitation. And it's a pleasure to give a talk. I don't know how much do you deal with these things in your research, so I prepared quite a big presentation just to, explain some things I'm building on in this project. But if you feel free, please to interrupt me anytime and ask questions.
For example, governance instead of government.
Yeah, I will just. There are close cousins.
Yeah.
Yes, I just will tell a couple of words about myself. I'm still a postdoc at the Department of Political Science, and I'm affiliated with this group of people who call themselves the Quality of Government Institute. Government. It is not a formal group, but we are just united more by the research interests. And I will tell you in a minute what are our research interests and how we differ from the rest of the department, and we do quite differ. I came here almost 3 years ago because this research focus was the only thing I wanted to do as a political scientist, and I'm really happy. And now, as you know, the Swedish Research Council was so kind to grant money to the project that I'm going to conduct together with my former colleague here at Koch, and now she's at Trinity College Dublin, Michelle Darcy. And it is quite a convoluted title, Credible Commitment Before Credible Enforcement, but I hope you will get it at the end that it is not that difficult. Mm-hmm. And we are going to explore the importance of sequencing. So this is basically pretty much early stages. We haven't moved beyond the original proposal much, but we will kick off with the project in the second half of the year. So the fundamental question that we raised in this project is what kind of institution promote and enable human well-being, human flourishing, and how these kind of institutions emerge. And this is a research question which is very different from normal research questions asked by political scientists, because they are interested at how the power is formed, the classical three: who gets what, how, when, and how. So they are dealing, for example, if you look at democratization, what research questions they ask? Their main variable is politics. Yes, to what extent, when, and how a country has become a representative democracy. And they look at a bunch of independent variables, predominantly socio-cultural or historical cultural, and try to ask this question. So the question, what democracy implies for the society it governs, for example, how it affects human well-being, has hardly ever raised in this research. And the head of the Koch Institute, Burenstein, he says that the American Congress, rightly so, deprived the political scientists of the access to this National Research Foundation because they don't ask relevant questions. They have the questions about voting behavior, about politics as such, and nothing for the kind of wider our wider well-being, for the well-being of people as a whole. So at the Quality of Government Institute we ask precisely these questions. We focus at the we picked up this main variable, the quality of government, and we think that it is a very how the government is organized. I cannot talk about the whole research of the COG, but this is what the question we ask: what institutions promote and enable human flourishing? And if you look at the current answer, mainstream, the answer would be strong and democratic states. And this approach promoted and so good governance agenda, which is picked up by the World Bank, IMF, SIDA, you name it, many developmental organizations. And the strategy is to promote state building and democratization at the same time. Here is the book by Pippa Norris. She is one of the better kind of democracy scholars. And on the first page, and I'm already old enough to to make it like this. So she says that this book advances the argument that both liberal democracy and state capacity need to be strengthened in parallel to ensure effective development. So this is like a current gospel, kind of that strong democratic states, and they should be built in parallel. So what I want to show in this presentation, first of all, how these answers were achieved, why we found them inadequate, and basically what we suggest instead. And I would just to give you an example, this good governance agenda. World Bank came up with these 6 governance indicators. If you look at them closely, you can see the first 2 directly relate to democracy, and the 4 bottom ones, they are in fact state capacity. This is this idea of strong and democratic states. They've been, putting aside the critiques that this is like methodologically very flawed. So they basically, this is the recipe for development. They attach this good governance criteria to as a conditionality to aid, and this is a big business these days.
Okay, now I'll ask my question once more. In English, if you say good government, that has a process-product ambiguity.
Yeah.
Could mean dynamic and it could mean static, okay?
Yeah.
While this word could also have a process-product ambiguity. Why have you switched from government to governance?
Because probably in this because government implies more government implies more the machinery of specific organization like the government, right?
So you think it has a more static ring to it?
Yeah, and the output, what they do.
Well, this has a more dynamic process.
Here we also take the input side, the politics, and we try to look at the. So here we have government, and we have input side politics and output side. These are all good or bad things. Government, whether it is effective policy, quality, regulatory quality high or low, corruption high or low. So when we take governance, we take both these sides, and when we speak government, we kind of look at the output side of the governance process. I know from a linguistic point of view, probably it is not particularly.
Not completely crystal clear.
I agree. And these two, to be honest, in all honesty, governance and government, in this particular literature, developmental literature, they are used interchangeably.
Yeah.
While if you when you switch a little bit to the public administration literature, for example, then governance is a different species altogether. It's not only about state, but it's also about NGOs involved, into process of public goods delivery, etc. So for this reason, it is a quite a complex definition to do. Let's assume that here I can speak, and we can use interchangeably government and governance.
Okay, so in the other literature, then it does not necessarily refer to the national agencies controlling the country. It could be any private big associations,
Yes,
even
exactly.
in capitalist
Yes,
companies, and what they do.
It can be company, private company, it
How
can
they
be NGO also involved in the public goods
Okay.
delivery. It can be
So any control mechanisms.
anything, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. This is particularly after new public management has been introduced or achieved in this.
They like this word.
The very public administration scholars really like this word, governance. And it stands for for exactly as you say, for delivering public goods not only by the means of the what we call government, but also private entities and
Mhm.
NGOs.
Mhm.
Okay? And basically, this is a list of characteristics of Western states today, and they represent the ideal, and this is what the World Bank and organizations like this want to other countries achieve before or after they give them aid, depending on how strict the conditionality is. So, what are the theoretical foundation? Where this idea of that strong and democratic states deliver human well-being, where does it come from? And here we are drawing on two families of rational choice theories of the state. First one is collective action, and another one is credible commitment. And again, it sounds a little bit like jargonistic, but I hope this is in the next couple of slides we will clear the things up. So, what is the problem of collective action, and what is the logic of collective action? So, when people try to get engaged in collective endeavors, they often face the problem of collective action. To put it simply, it's this odd mismatch between individual incentives and what we may loosely call collective interests. Okay, we would all benefit from cooperating to solve the collective problem we have. But our individual rational incentives are to non-cooperation, to free ride. And this kind of problem best captured in Prisoner's Dilemma. You probably know, yes, that if they both not act on their rational self-interest, the collective outcome for two of them will be better off than as compared when they think in their own interests, and in the end their collective outcome is Pareto subnational, suboptimal at Nash equilibrium. Yes?
Just a short question.
Yes.
Do you require that all of if you define a group, collective, you have to define it somehow, but is it a requirement that all gain from, as is stated there, from cooperation? Couldn't it be sufficient for a situation to be or for a, if for example most gain from it, or if it was maximizing the aggregated preferences or something like that? I know it is a case with the prisoner's dilemma, but you have many situations where some people might gain from not cooperating, and most people would gain from it.
Yes, I mean,
but still,
collective action refers to a situation where we will all be better off. We all have a problem. Like, for example, many people suggest to look at the global warming as collective action. So it's not really a situation where the most gain.
but this is a requirement, because then a lot take corruption, for example. There you have a case where some obviously gain from the
Exactly.
corruptive. the
Yeah.
corruptive situation, and
And
doesn't that require collective action?
exactly, corruption is a collective action problem.
But then this definition requires too much, because Putin gains from his state being corrupted.
Yes, but people do not. Yes, people. Putin gains. I don't know about Putin, but yes, let's say the group.
Maybe
of-
not Putin.
Yeah,
No.
obviously in every society there is like a group that benefits from corruption. But white people do not. We would be better off. Everyone would be better off without corruption.
Not Putin.
Our
That's my point.
yes,
He's too strong.
collectively, yes, as a whole.
Yeah,
As a
okay.
whole, our collective.
The maximizes preferences if you have a summative definition.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
So it's, I mean, you can game theoretically there are different situations. If
yeah.
everyone,
It is Pareto optimal. It will be
Yeah,
Pareto
okay.
optimal. Okay.
yeah,
It will be at
Yeah.
least one better
Yeah.
off and no
Yeah.
one worse off. So
that
this
is
is.
an answer to my question.
But I have a different question.
Yeah.
Adam Smith told us that if everyone acts to his own best interests, it will benefit the
I
collective the
know.
most.
I know. This
That's
is.
a direct counterclaim to
Yes,
this.
exactly. It's true that the market is an instance of collective action problem when
Yeah.
we act in our self-interest and we achieve at some beneficial outcome for us as a group, as a whole again.
Right.
But markets have problems. Markets don't work in a situation of public goods production. And this is where state... Yes.
Debatable.
Huh?
That's debatable, you know.
Yeah,
Capitalist
yeah. Oh, well.
industrialization has led to a major production of cheap goods for everyone.
Yeah, no, but I mean, public goods, it's like roads, right? Lighting, infrastructure. I mean, public goods is a special category.
But you didn't say
Education.
that's you haven't.
Yeah, we haven't said this.
No.
I haven't said. I think you need to probably, if the next couple of slides don't answer your question, then
Okay,
come
okay.
back. But I think
Okay.
you will find an answer to this. So this is particularly true. We are saying that this situation of collective action problem is particularly true to the public goods provision. And here is one of my favorite quotes from rational choice theorist I'm drawing on. He said that individuals did not come to build large irrigation systems or serve in armies by happy coincidence of individual self-interests. So this is probably like a kind of answer to like
Well,
to
is
build-
that how do we? I need historical evidence.
Yes.
How do we know that no irrigation systems were not built by several people just happening to coincide in a nice way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We probably don't know this for sure, but
No.
there is some evidence that from which we kind of infer this. Yeah. I mean, again, maybe it will be. I'm talking about a little bit about this in the future, in the down the line. So maybe it will answer your questions,
Okay.
but at the moment I don't want to jump into this conclusion, into this discussion at this point. And then we have a problem. Again, the rational choice theories that distinguish between collective action, between small and big groups. And this is one of earlier collective action theories, David Hume. He was saying that in small groups, and imagine like two neighbors, they may agree to drain a meadow which they possess in common, because it's easy for them to know each other's mind, and each must perceive that the immediate consequence of his failing in his part is the abandoning of the whole project. So if we share a meadow and you don't contribute, oh, okay, I want you to be good. You contribute and I don't contribute. For you, you know that there is no value in only you contributing your part, because my non-contribution basically fails the project as a whole, right? You can do both our work, and this would be my intention. I will still enjoy the benefits of this collective good, right? But I will not be contributing. And this is what we claim, or rational choice theories claim. This is the major dominant strategy of people, to free ride, to enjoy the benefits of the public goods production, but not to contribute. And also, coming back to Hume, he's saying, but it is very difficult and indeed impossible that 1,000 persons should agree in any such action. It being difficult for them to concert so complicated in design, and still more difficult for them to execute it, while each seeks a pretext to free himself of the trouble and expense, and will lay the whole burden on others. I think this is a precise characteristic of the collective action problem. So we have people like Eleanor Ostrom, who is the Nobel Prize winner. She dealt a lot on collective action in small groups, and she said it's possible to serve. The peer-to-peer monitoring is effective. We can observe, like in a group like this, we can observe how much each contributes. We can punish. We can threaten a punishment at least. Yes, so it's better. But what do we do in a situation in a large group? Who can concert so complicated in design and execute it, considering that each one tries to free ride? So, and here is there have been theoretical developments in both economics and politics. Economics was studying the firms, and the politics was studying states, and both of which came to a conclusion that we need an external agent to solve the collective action problem. For states, it would be Hobbes, Leviathan, right, the most known and prominent writing. And in economics, it was much later. It was we are drawing mostly on Bernd Holmstrom work on firms and the need of owners. So this external agent, and for the future we will call it Leviathan, he monitors, or it monitors individual contribution and sanctions non-compliance. So he has eyes and he has teeth, right? He has eyes to see everyone, and he has teeth to bite non-compliant free riders. So, and we have this external yes, external agent who is active and powerful, and this is in the end the defining characteristic of the state is the monopoly of violence. So. And this is the first question. So we need this external agent, right, who monitors compliance and punishes free riders. But obviously there are serious problems with this external agent. So if we need external agent because of our selfishness, how can we assume that Leviathan is altruistic, right? And it is not, or he is not. First, his position in the production process is suspicious from our point of view. He has access to the residual, to the surplus generated by the provision of public goods, and what he wants just to put his hand there and to redistribute this to his own benefit and the benefit of his group, as Douglas North says. And second, obviously, he has incentives, right, to steal, and he is powerful, right? He has eyes and teeth, he has coercive power, so he can basically brush us off. And what happens in a society with rent city seeking opportunistic or morally hazardous rulers, basically anticipating opportunistic actions on behalf of the Leviathan, people will converge on minimal contributions. And again, the output will be below what it could have been. So, but Gary Van Geest says, any state that is strong enough to protect the country from external enemies is also strong enough to redefine property rights and contract enforcement at any time in the interest of the political elite. This is also, by the way, very game theoretical. This is the trust game, and this is all like explained in game theoretical terms. So we have, again, this is what I just said, that people will, political potential constituencies, they will not contribute, and overall our output will be suboptimal. And this is basically this persistent tension between the ownership structure, which maximizes the rent to the ruler and his group, and an efficient system that reduces transaction costs and encourages growth, was named as the fundamental root cause of the failure of society to experience sustained economic growth. This is the main, probably, claim of Douglas North, with which he also was awarded the Nobel Prize back in, I don't know, already very many years ago. So, what are the solutions? What are the solutions to this problem of constraining Leviathan? We need to credibly commit the Leviathan to the good of the society, so-called, right? And there are several solutions the literature developed here. The first is so-called to tie the hands of the external agent through the separation of powers, vita players, check and balances. You all heard about this. And more recently, people started to say that there is also the case for an insulating bureaucracy, a bureaucracy which puts a barrier between individual politicians' moral hazard penetrating the public goods production. Then you have a lot probably heard about the possibility.
Is this second point, is that a Swedish contribution? No?
American.
But you know, it's been in a practice in Sweden for a long time. They call it ministerstyre, and it's supposed to be a very bad. But in most other countries, it's always been okay.
Yeah, I know.
So here,
but but there is a big following here in Sweden for this idea.
big following.
Yeah.
Because of the tradition here.
Yes, because basically it's relevant. People see the value of this. Yes. And above all, of course, it's democracy. Democracy that punishes the politicians and the ballot box. And this is, as Danny Roderick, one of the mega names in the business, he says democracy is a meta-institution for building good institutions. So, this is like a kind of evolution of solutions to credible commitment, and everything converges to democracy. Democracy is the answer. So, this is our starting point, right? And so we are saying that governing involves a lot. It has a lot to do with solving collective action problems. Namely, because state has a lot to do with the public goods production. And then we need an external enforcer who is monitoring compliance and punishes free riders. So we need credible enforcer, right? But then we need to commit to constrain this creature, and we need credible commitment. So it seems that we have ingredients for good government, for government that produces human well-being. Whatever you need, whatever you take the red part, it's like more theoretical. You take low part, it's more conversational kind of. And this is all good, and the strength of this approach, that is its strong logical plausibility of the claim, and it's deductively derived in many cases, formally, both in terms of prisoner's dilemma and the trust game on which the credible commitment is built. But it is hopelessly ahistorical and static, right? And what I mean by ahistorical, so they assume that do Leviathans emerge with perfect monitoring and enforcement capacities? And basically the answer to this question is no. Archaeological research, there is an archaeology of states, okay? They say that suggested that acquiring eyes and teeth is not a binary switch, it's a process. They're talking about chiefdoms, complex polities with sufficiently centralized but not deeply sophisticated administrations. And then they're talking about primary states and then all the states. So it's a kind of, you can see it. Obviously, it is not a Leviathan.
Possible counterexample are revolutions, because then you can get rulers with very strong powers, enforcing power and monitoring. Take the French Revolution, take the Russian Revolution. Lenin,
But
he's
this-
very quickly, only a few years, he's right there. Strong enforcing capacities, and he has a secret, the Cheka.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
so
true.
it has lots of
It's true.
monitoring.
It's true, but I mean, again, I kind of yes want to guide you through all the kind of what I know, and then yes, but it's also any regime, kind of new regime is building. Also, Lenin was not building in the void, right?
No, he used the Tsarist
Yes.
mechanisms, but take the
Exactly.
French Revolution, they used less of the royal machinery.
I mean, probably it is possible to, but I mean, at least when we talk at the early development, it's not a switch, binary switch. And is it possible in modern kind of times? Let's see what I
Well,
can-
maybe this is a counterexample a bit to the game theoretical.
Which one?
This thing that you can actually emerge fairly quickly,
Well, yeah,
and it's not a good idea
Exactly.
at all.
This is what we are. This is just what I presented to you. This is what we are drawing on, and this is talking about weakness. What this is the part where we find less
Weakness.
convincing, and we want to move forward
Okay.
from this part.
That's good.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And also there was a great variability in the organization of early states, and also if you look at the medieval or early modern states, and if you look at the contemporary states, there is a great variability in the extent of this monitoring and enforcement capacities. So this is the first thing, that they are hopelessly ahistorical. They assume that credible enforcement is given, and we think that it's not the case. And secondly, okay, they say that both kind of conditions are necessary conditions, but do you get the same outcome from different sequencing? Credible enforcement plus credible commitment. If you put credible commitment, democracy first, and then you state build, or you put it at the same time, do we achieve the same outcome? So they don't answer this question. So we have, as we say, they provided us with ingredients, but they didn't provide the recipe for the good governance. I have to say that there is a separate literature in the political science about this sequencing, and it's particularly reached its culmination in the Journal of Democracy in 2007. There is this heated exchange between several scholars. So some say democracy plus state capacity, human well-being. Some say state capacity plus democracy, human well-being. And the third way, as you can see, yes, it's at the same time. We build this at the same time. So we appreciate that they bring the issue of timing into the picture, but their weakness, they are hopelessly theoretical. They are all there is no any like more or less solid theoretical underpinning to their argument. It's more like a commonsensical kind of discussion about the issue. So what we suggest to propose, what we call is a dynamic model of the state. So we are saying that in the beginning, state is not a leviathan, okay? It doesn't have the perfect monitoring and enforcing capacity enabling to solve collective actions. And we also have citizens' preferences to non-compliance. It's by default, right? So, and in order to become a leviathan, right, the state must override citizens' preferences, basically. If becoming a leviathan is a process, then the extent to which the state is credible and hence the strength of individuals' preferences to resist the state should be understood as a continuum. And although individuals will always want to free ride, this is rational choice assumes as a dominant preference. The strength of these incentives will be in function of of the credibility of the state as an enforcer. And if you look at early state building, maybe this answers your question. We have ethnographic research which says that early states appeared where there was no escape from the state. And what I mean, it's a quote as well from Harris. Early humans, he says, like many later ones, showed a marked preference for hunting and foraging in small egalitarian bands. The state emerged when individuals no longer had this choice. States were formed in circumscribed geographical areas like Mesopotamia and Egypt. Deserts, the ocean, and mountains were the barriers that allowed chiefs of pre-state bands to corner large enough population to make the transitions to statehood. I mean, I'm obviously not an ethnographer of early states, but I'm kind of inclined to believe to this situation that big things like irrigation projects appeared first of all in Egypt, and people were cornered to this solution. They didn't come voluntarily to those situations. Then we also had the archaeological research, and they showed that burned or forcefully abandoned settlements, these are evidence of government presence of state authority. There is a big literature of archaeology of state, and it shows that the early state building was quite a violent business, quite coercive. And then we have research into, for example, early modern state in Europe, and as an example, the 16th century Holland, they had corporal punishments, banishment, enforced pilgrimage, the pillory, money fines, and even hostage taking and detention for what? For not paying taxes. This is, if you look at all these things, this is like pillory, you know, all these things, it's quite forceful and
it's true about Sweden too.
And absolutely, absolutely. In every English village, you will have this pillory. Yes, people sit like this. So then, if you look at state building in contemporary developing countries, and sorry for the slide, it's not particular, but I just took it from. So this is like our colleague from Norway, and he's very well established in this taxation, you know, state capacity and taxation issues. So it's Tanzania. What he's saying, widespread tax resistance is observed in the study areas. People may take to the extreme to evade taxes. For instance, by literally hiding in the bush when tax collectors are approaching. In particular, the revenue administration in Kilosa, DC, relies heavily on simple physical coercion to obtain the resources they need from their subject and to ensure compliance. So if you look at this is obviously, we are talking about Tanzania, very low enforcement and monitoring capacity state, and this is what they have to, people still have preferences to free ride, right? And this is what the state has to refer to ensure compliance. So, yes, as state improves its monitoring and coercive capabilities and becomes more credible as enforcer, the strength of the preferences to defect will weaken. This is what we say, and even if never disappears. This is like a kind of our claim. But then in this situation, when into this picture comes democracy, what happens? Just before I introduce democracy, I would like to remind you that by definition, democracy is designed to make states responsive to their citizens, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a direct contradiction to what we are, to the previous logic, and to limit citizens' and to limit their ability to override them. There are very many definitions of democracy existing, but all the existing definitions imply a system of governance that is in some meaningful way reflective of the preferences of citizens, right? So we have preferences to non-compliance, then we introduce democracy, and this is what happens. State must respond to preferences of non-compliance, right? And state finds itself tripped in the vicious circle of not being able to become a leviathan, and a society as a whole finds itself in a vicious circle of not being able to reach their maximum, their welfare frontier. So this is, we think, this is basically what was in the proposal, basically. And we think we basically didn't do anything but just provided some rigor, some theoretical underpinning to the claim which was made by James Madison very many years ago. He's saying, in framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place oblige it to control itself. So this is I think the recipe was known, and we kind of explained why it is important. I mean, I will very briefly come. We derived 3 hypotheses from this, so that if state democratized before it has become credible enforcer, it will be less efficient in solving collective action problems. If democratization comes after the state had become credible enforcer, it will be more efficient, and the society overall will be better off. And the third one is democratizing before the state has become a credible enforcer lowers the probability that the state will become a credible enforcer and will be able to solve collective action problems.
So these are arguments for China against India.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yes, you are right. It was also
Very good example.
thinking about this. So to test first and second hypothesis, we would like to collect some historical data on monitoring and enforcement capacity in the area of taxation. We chose taxation because it is a kind of first order collective action, and it is seen as a constitutive determinant of state capacity. So if you kind of manage to solve the taxation things, you will be able to solve other collective action things. So we would like to look at when and with what success states began acquiring monitoring and enforcement capacities. And we want to look at land and property, cadastral maps, property registers, and then we would like to look at people, for example, census. And our dependent variable is the tax effort, is the gap between what the state collects opposite to what it should collect given its economic structure and other kind of structural prerequisites.
What does cadastral maps mean?
Cadastral maps I will tell you in a second.
Okay.
This is a large scale. I even have a picture. Large scale, but this is my favorite bit. And this third hypothesis is we would like to do it qualitatively. And we chose 2 cases. One is Ireland versus Sweden. Why we chose it? I mean, my colleague is Irish and I'm Russian. When we came here, we were simply shocked by the amount of information the state here is collecting about individuals. And I mean, the precision and what they know about us, how often they require this information to be updated. I mean, all this honestly mind-blowing for me as a Russian and for her as an Irish citizen as well. The Irish government introduced a household levy, okay, a property levy, and but they don't have postcodes, okay, so they can't collect it. They don't have postcodes. They have about 1,000 properties for one postcode, okay. So as a result, the compliance rate was something like 42%. Okay, they just couldn't collect this tax. I mean, it's obviously not a problem here, right? Because the state knows too much for my liking. Anyway, so we chose this because not only because of this. Ireland and Sweden democratized at the same year. Okay, in 1921, I mean approximately Sweden, and Ireland 1922. So, and we want to show our explanatory case is Ireland. How democratization, Ireland was not a credible enforcer at the time of democratizing. how democratization impacted the state's ability to improve monitoring and enforcement capacities and collect tax. And Sweden clearly was a credible enforcer at the time of democratization in 1922, and we want just to show, like, as a background, as a shadow case, yes, we call it. And the method is process tracing. So, and if you look at the Sweden, right? So it's all, we look at beginning of the 17th century, but in reality it's all started with Gustav Vasa probably, about that time. So in 5040s about, he introduced this individual tax register, this, I don't know, Jörger Boker, right?
Jordeböcker.
Boker. So instead of collective responsibility for the tax, this was, the burden was shifted to individuals. Now every individual was in the record with land, not so much property, but the land that it's possessed. But the land was the main taxable kind of asset, right? The land was where the wealth was created, and land was worth recording, so to say. Then he expanded the Institute of Tax Collectors. If in the beginning of his reign there were about 50 local offices of bailiffs, by the end it was more than 200. It's a typo. 200. It was not that dramatic yet. But my favorite bit is in 1630, Sweden, first in the European countries, in the post-Renaissance countries. There were maps here and there, but Sweden was the first country that mapped the whole territory of the realm with cadastral maps. Cadastral map is a large-scale map. I will show you in a minute how does it look like. So not only whole territory of Sweden, but also territories in the geopolitical interest of Sweden, like Baltic states, Finland, and others. So, the church was given legal responsibility for monitoring, and I will also tell about this a little bit in a minute. Officially, it's from the end of the 17th century, but de facto it's perhaps even earlier, from the Reformation, when the 1/10, right, of the church tax was not already meant to be collected for the church, but for the crown instead. The state bureaucracy instead that it's monitoring directly.
Sorry, how much? According to Christianity, you can collect 1/10, right?
Yeah.
And so the church was giving how much of this to?
No, but I mean the church was reformed by Gustav Vasa, right?
1527.
So, yes. So and from this on, the church was used as a monitoring agent. Not only they collected the tenths for themselves, but they also performed.
But did they take more than 1/10, or they shared the tenth with the state?
They collected more than they collected other tithe and other.
Well, in those days they didn't. They took also cheese and cows.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So, by what we have for sure, the data for just 2 years before the full suffrage was introduced in Sweden, 80% of economically active population was registered with the tax authorities, right? So it's right before and there was a culture of state, keeping an eye on you and keeping you within its registration system. So I will just go a little bit, would like to illustrate some of these points. This is how it's called? Jordeböcker, yes. So this is an entry basically with who is the person, how much land he earns, and other taxable assets. It is from Jordeböcker of Varmland in 5040. So this is an original one. But my favorite one is this geometriske Jordeböcker, and this is the cadastral map. Okay, and I would like to show you closer. So it's not so much that it's not about property, right? The property is rubbish here, but you see These are the lengths. They are all in different shapes and marked differently. It is not only, so you can see, I'll read you, what is this? It's type of land. Is it arable, is it meadow, pasture, bog, or forest? And if it is arable or in agriculture use, then what kind of crop they grow, and what kind of, you see this is like crop on each of these letters, and how much, what was the yield, right? So it was a perfect tool for not only know about your assets, but also a tool to tax properly, right? Because one of the problems with taxation, even today, that it's very often arbitrary, you know. So it was a very good instrument that to put a lot, but not so much that completely, you know, to induce revolt after revolt after revolt. So it was used very, very clever. And then also it was still under Vaza time. They developed a value for a unit to value the land. It's called again I forgot the name of it. Mantal. A unit of the value of the lands, right? So a wealth of a farm. So it was fully developed by the end of the Gustav Vasa reign, and it was also used as a taxing unit. So it was, I mean, your state has done a lot of interesting things. This is cadastral map. This is I basically took just at random from this.
Do you think cadastral map is a sort of a Swedish word?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know better. No, I
Yeah,
don't
but
think so.
could be a very.
So the scale is 1 to 4,000, and the whole territory is covered like this. And the people are amazed how accurate these cards are, these maps were. So the difference between this one and this one is 314 years, right? This one was in 1637, and this one is 1952. The buildings have changed, but the landscape, because this is a river, they say that this is like a creek here, the landscape and the outline of the farm is still kind of the same. I mean, it says also a lot about the persistence in this country, you know, that in 300 years nothing has changed.
So registerkarta.
Registerkarta.
Enligt Google Map.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cadastra in English, French, and late Latin.
So, and this is how the church was used to collect taxes for the state. This is late. You see, this is like end of the 18th century. But this book, it's called the Historical Database of Scania Agriculture. And on the left side, you see it's the name of the farm and the size of the farm and the name of the farmer. Okay, it was Paul Rasmussen and then his son Rasmus Paulson. And on the right side, it's the clergyman registered how much he collected, right? In crop, in bunches of crop. You know, it's called, the English word is sheaves, but I
Kärver på svenska.
yeah. Okay, so how he collected,
Yeah.
and he wrote this for different type of crops: for summer rye, for winter rye, spring rye, barley, oats, wheat, buckwheat, and beans. Right. And the very last column is also it's contained information on the number of cows, lamb, geese, everything that you said. They collected in all kind of forms and shapes taxes. They could not collect in monetary terms. So what we are saying, that monitoring and enforcement capacity before democratization was high. As a result, we have tax collection these days. I'm not saying about the size of the taxes. It's high, right? Sweden is a high taxing country. but the tax effort is how much they collect vis-a-vis how much they can collect, is 98.4%. It's the best, it's the top. Okay? It is. Yeah! I mean, we are not saying that this is like, that is why Sweden is considered like, one of the top in terms of human well-being, how much state provides. Of course, state provides much because the policies were adopted, but could it be possible to achieve this, without this technical kind of underpinning? Probably not, right? If it was this Irish kind of magnitude of tax collection, I mean, they would be where they are at the moment. So, just briefly, Ireland. Before Ireland democratized, enforcement and monitoring capacity was very low. It was a colony, right? And the British state sat only in the capital. They didn't expand. They rule through landlords. So, no first complete cadastral map, middle 19th century, no direct monitoring on peasantry. Church was Catholic, right? It was outlawed. The Protestant state could not cooperate with the Catholic Church. The bulk of peasantry were outside the tax net. From the same resource that where we saw that 80% of the economically active population were in tax net, they're saying that in 1940, only 3% of the economically active population was registered to pay tax. Is it surprising? I mean, if you look at India, it's 2.5%.
How much?
2.5. Okay. So so it's the same. So as you can see, the dependent variable, right? Tax effort is only like slightly below 70%, and fiscal deficit is huge. It's they also have lower taxes as well. But the point is that they really collect only 2/3 of what they should have collected, right? And I will probably skip this. So we look at
What's the number for Greece?
Yeah, I mean, we just don't know. Yes, but we concentrate on this. But I mean, you got the idea where it's going. It's probably very low. So here we wanted to say that the population used the mechanism offered by democracy to challenge the state, not to pay taxes, not to be registered, all kinds of pretexts. Voluntary tax amnesties, there were 2. They remained secret. Secrecy clause were upheld by the courts. So it's only a glimpse. And again, if you talk about the democracy, if government increases taxes, people punish them at the poll box. If they abolish taxes, they reward them. So this is what happens when you have weak, not a credible enforcer and quite developed democracy as well. So what is the conclusion? I mean, I think we kind of we argue that we provided a recipe for good government and human well-being, and actually in part we provide an answer to the sequencing conundrum. And also we bring the issue of time into very sophisticated rational choice theories of the state, and we think that we use the insights to build something I don't know, at least more persuasive to us at the moment. And how do constrained leviathans emerge? And empirically, I mean, a lot of work is ahead, but the case of Ireland, Sweden supports the notion that democratization at the stages when the state building is in the beginning, it doesn't produce the optimal results.
Yes. So what did you say? Sorry, I need to ask again. What about the credible commitment then? What happened-
They have credible commitment, right, in Ireland. The government is constrained, they have the rule of law, they have courts, right? So all this one is working there, but they don't have credible enforcer. The state is not credible as an enforcer. And the democracy shakes the state or undermines basically, yes, the state as a credible democracy. It provided instruments that people can use and act to challenge the state, not to be members of the tax registrations, to I mean, you name it. They individually, on individual basis, they challenge the tax size, the amount of size, the amount of tax the state collects. I mean, you name it. They use democracy just to act upon their free riding preferences. And in the end, if you look at major, we look only in here, we only show you the tax collection. But if you look at any other measurements of well-being, Ireland is, I mean, obviously it is a developed country. It's not as desperate as many African countries, right? But it's a big difference between Ireland and Sweden. In terms of, for example, access to free healthcare, in terms of education for children, you know, it's a very big difference. It's like two worlds apart. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it seems reasonable. You have a case here. It seems reasonable, and even the explanation that in a democracy where the state has not muscles, you are not willing to give them. But one could imagine that if you have a state with big muscles, it wouldn't give the people democracy. Although it has happened here and there in the world, a few places. So there seem to be symmetrical, not the same, different historical conditions, but symmetrical kind of explanation that you need to, as you said from the beginning, you can just start with these two kinds of rational choice theories.
Yes, you are right. I mean, it's absolutely right that basically, I mean, you put it in a very, very gently. You know, I mean, normally what we face that we are against democracy and we provide support to Putin in the worst case and what is his name in the
maybe he's good in the long run in this sense. You don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yes, you are right. I mean, it is an issue, but I think that it is like a kind of a sub-project, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within the project. So we need to address this issue. Yes. What happens when there is the state is credible, but is not constrained and not willing to succeed, right? To the requirement of good government. So we obviously, I mean, I don't have the answer.
No.
But I mean, I just I thought I pre-anticipated your question. So normatively, our answer is not particularly palatable. And because basically, again, we are saying, yeah, people say, yeah, you then want people to be tortured for the sake of high taxes and everything. I mean, we probably don't want to do this, in all honesty. What we want, we think that we actually first of all, I fully subscribe to this Adrian Leftic idea that if people's misery is top, then we need to address this regardless of our normative preferences, right? So people living in poverty and this kind of stuff more important than rights and civil liberties, yes? This is first thing. And second thing is that democracy, I think, the democracy scholars, I think, should look at this and pick up from here and defend, right? I think we are basically finished and we are making a service to democracy, right? So there is assumption that that obviously not as good as democratic scholars think. So they should pick it up and address.
There is I have seen some books on post-democracy ideas. Has this to do with this, or I haven't read that, but I've seen
Post-democracy in what way?
in the way that we don't think that democracy is such a big solution
Right.
to.
Well, I mean, it is, to be honest, a kind of the tide is turning a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look like even, I don't know, 5 years ago, it was a democracy promotion. First of all, is a big literature and it's a big business, as you know. We have at the department, we have a project which is called Varieties of Democracy. They are still collecting the data about all types of democracy, still within the same, spirit of that democratization brings all the good things, right? Yes, there are scholars like Francis Fukuyama, for example, who say, or Amartya Sen, who says, if you compare India and China, unfortunately, autocratic China does much better than democratic India, right? The US doubled living standards every 30 years since after democracy. China has doubled living standards every 10 years.
So it depends on what you would like to achieve.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Where
well,
you
that's
start from.
the good life. We haven't talked enough about that.
No.
I mean, you're showing us that Ireland is less efficient than Sweden when it comes to tax collection. Well, interesting. But what's that got to do with a good life? I mean, I know people who've emigrated from Sweden to Ireland because they thought it was nicer to live there.
I mean, I think Michelle also went back because she was a bit overwhelmed.
Right. So, I mean, you have to tell us a little more about what's
Yeah,
a good
I
life.
agree. I should have done that. Yes, on basic measurements of human well-being, right?
Economic measurements.
No, it's about
Poverty range, or
Huh?
how many poor people. In that case, the United States would not come out so well because
It is not so much the economy, because, like for example, one of the leading measures, Human Development Index, the GDP sits very heavily there. And if you look at Human Development Index, Ireland and Sweden are not that far apart, but it's based on. If you look at, again, GDP per capita, we don't look at this, but we look at, for example, things like, again, access to free healthcare, and we look at access.
they don't have free healthcare on Ireland.
I mean, the coverage is not the same. What they have on the access is not the same, and the depth is far not the same. Okay, what they can have on free health care is just basically paracetamol problem.
Okay. But then I still think you should do some work on this.
To
on
just to show that
clarifying
it is
what
a-
good life
yeah.
means. And
Yeah. No, I mean it is yes. I mean we basically well-being we measure it. It is quite standard. We measure it in terms of this. The number
Education.
of education, the number of health years of life, not just the longevity of life, but the number of health years of life. Okay, so this kind of things. This is when people are happy basically and running and don't think about the health. So on this kind of things, there is a kind of like a dozen maybe indicators, and all of them. Yeah, Ireland fires much lower than Sweden. And again, Ireland is not the worst case scenario by far. It is a developed country, right? So if you look at, So they still have some state capacity, and they still have, some state. In some cases,
Okay, but there might still be a surplus meaning of well-being which is not captured by that operational measurement that you...
yeah, of course. I mean,
And even if you have health as a central parameter, why would you choose not axiomatically, but per definition, free access? Because you could imagine a situation where you have market-controlled access, but where more people live better and longer.
maybe, yeah, true.
So you should have some
True.
more principled measure.
True.
I don't suggest that's the case,
Yeah, true.
because it doesn't
no,
seem
but
to be
this
the
is-
case.
yeah,
But
this is a
Well,
this is a good
well,
point.
I can add that I was thinking about Hans Rosling and his work about healthcare and so forth in the third world. I interpret his research as basically saying that a good healthcare system or basic healthcare system comes before democracy and before, in a sense, also capitalism in that sense. That you need a healthy population in order to have a good government and a good capitalistic market.
yeah, but
So,
I didn't.
yeah. Yeah, so in that sense,
No,
that's more basic.
no,
than-
it could be more basic,
Yeah.
but it could still be controlled by a smart god, or it could be distributed evenly, or it could be by a market mechanism. In principle,
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
so
but
the
it's-
measurement shouldn't be
You're right,
phrased in
yeah,
terms
this is-
of free access, because free access could be, as a matter of empirical fact, the thing that
Yeah, but what I meant
distributed.
is that if Hans Rosling is correct, he's
As-
basically saying that you cannot have a good healthcare system from the basis of capitalism per se.
he says that, yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, and it might be true.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't have a measurement just based on that he has said
Mm.
that.
He's a medical doctor. Whose
Yeah,
interest is he
exactly.
saying?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I think with this comparison between Ireland and Sweden, I mean, we wanted to. It's just like a dramatic example of
Yeah.
difference. So we also plan to conduct a kind of contemporary case studies, and when we will look at, developing countries with better, with asymmetrical situation, and then to look at kind of all the measurements of well-being, human well-being, and to see whether it makes sense. So in this case, it is a little bit, not as clear as we would like to be.
Yeah, I have this. Mark, I was remembering when you were talking about this. I have this course in human rights, and I got a lower grade on my group because to say that Nigeria didn't really need democracy at the moment, in that sense, because they had all kind of different priorities to dealt with. And because I said that, I got a lower grade in the human rights course. And it's very interesting because then I connect this discussion on what is well-being and the public goods, and also some ideological conflicts that there might have in some democracy. Minorities, I don't know. So how would you live with that? I'm not sure how deep would it be to these values, even or religion or.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to this question. Yeah, but this is it's a good comment. I mean, probably like the more we think about this, the more our message about democracy is lower your expectations. Our expectations about democracy are too high, So, and if you look at again, Burenstein has now a new project which is called Performance of Democracies, where he says that democracies differ, and in a number of measurements which pertain to democracy per se, but also in a number of measures that refer to the organization of the state, and depending on these combinations, the democracies perform one higher or lower, right? So, but overall, as a universal solution, as it was even like 10 and less years ago to all our problems, I think it's lower our expectations. We should lower our expectations.
I think you should do more work also on the Adam Smith counterexample. You just said that introduce Leviathan like Hobbes, and you will, for the public goods, that's what we need. I wasn't totally convinced. I mean, when I was younger, I was an enthusiastic supporter of anarchism. For example, Peter Kropotkin and so on, and voluntary cooperation of various types. And I don't think you really showed that Adam Smith is wrong. That if we have lots of people who pursue their own means, let's say in a ethical way, maybe we should put some restriction on it, but if they do that, wouldn't that lead to a better result for the whole collective? And that's the classical sort of market solution.
Yeah, it is the kind of coordination versus hierarchy, right?
Right, and it's not so much prisoner's dilemma.
Yeah.
I think the practice has to be implemented somehow.
The what?
The practices.
Well, the practices implement themselves by conventions and norms that spontaneously spread.
How would you study that, Jens?
How would you study it?
Yes. But because I'm thinking you have two illustrative cases here.
Yeah.
Of course that is good. But what is needed in order
Well, you probably need
test
to.
it and
Well, we have to
support?
look historically at different societies, how different societies have developed, and then we have to see what the results are. But again, then we have to know what are the positive qualities that we're looking for that they should achieve. So when Bo Rothstein is in his latest project looking at different types of democracy, what's the kind of values he's measuring it against? How is he able to say that one type of democracy is better than another?
No, he's not saying, but there are different types. There are first past the poll system voting versus proportional, presidential versus parliamentary, blah 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 blah. There are all these lists of. There is judicial review in some countries. There is no judicial review. This is all things between.
So it's just a descriptive project.
I mean, you just measure this, right?
Yeah.
And then you measure also the organization of the state, and then you see how this affects different kind of
Okay, so he
outcomes.
just looks at what kind of decisions they are making in various.
Not what decisions, but how the processes are organized, right?
Yeah, because I was thinking of the United States as a counterexample to what you said about Ireland. In the United States, they don't like to raise taxes generally, but they have a very efficient tax collecting system, I would say.
Yes, they have.
So if it's supposed to go with an efficient tax collection system that you like taxes, then the United States and Sweden are they're completely different, right?
You shouldn't really compare the US and Sweden.
Why not?
I mean,
Because US is so large. And
Well, who cares? They still have a very important, good.
I mean,
like
to be
Europe and
honest,
US.
this is not. I wouldn't take it for granted that they are very effective.
But they are.
Can I put a note
Yeah.
here? I just found the IMF report on the tax effort.
Yeah.
And the United States, they have the tax collection 71%.
So I wouldn't say yes. I wouldn't say that they.
But my question even goes further, because we have some. How you can claim that this tax effort could be the good criteria for the strong government? Because we have several examples. For example, China that being here, and the percentage is just about 49%. And even a greater example of Singapore, that is known for the strong government with a 43% of the tax effort.
Singapore is surprising, but China is easier to explain because
Well,
they,
now we start to doubt this measure, tax effort. How do they?
Yeah,
How the hell do
exactly.
they know?
it's a regression. Yeah, it's also it's true, but the Chinese system of taxation is on the enterprise, not on individuals. So I mean, they put a lot of emphasis to tax the enterprises right, and then with that number of people, it is quite challenging as well, right?
Yeah.
So the leak comes from the individual the holes in the individual
And
taxation.
they don't have a welfare state.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I wanted to say something that what you were saying. I mean, America is not a strong Leviathan. Okay, this is our understanding. It's not. I
No.
mean, they don't provide public goods, right? They can't even, you know. I mean,
Depends what you mean by that. Well, if you take your measure, maybe they don't. But a lot of people in America like living there because they have a lot of freedom.
no, but liking to live somewhere is different. Yes.
Well, I don't know.
Because
Well-being must be related to like to live somewhere.
yes, but then you are pretty much going into to the level of development, you know, for the relative wealth, and it is better to live where it is where people are more wealthy, even though you are poorer compared to other people, but you live in a richer country, and it's better, you know. Yes, it's better to live, I don't know, in Luxembourg than it's.
But it's not just a question of wealth. It's a question of freedom. That you're able to, you know, you sit in your car, you drive out on the prairie, you listen to whatever rock station
Yeah, I
you
mean,
want.
of
I mean,
course,
it's a-
I mean, of course, this in the end, yeah, you talk a little bit like as a person whose basic needs are solved, you know, that you know that your health will be
Yeah.
taken look after, you know, that your kids will be, you know, grandchildren will be looked after in daycares, you know, it's a little bit, this is what you say, it's a
Perhaps,
kind of,
but all I'm pointing to is that they're multidimensional. this
it's true, but I
well-being,
mean,
you know.
this is what I present here is like a kind of standard measures that we use, you know. I am within my discipline. Should I like challenge it on this side? Perhaps, yeah, but I think in this project we challenge and upset a lot of people, so I wouldn't go, you know, on assault on this
Well, I
things.
think it would be interesting at least to go a little bit in the direction that Jens is, I don't say if you can say that in English, but fishing for. Because if you look at, on your first slide you had a very general formulation in terms of the state should prompt or stimulate the well-being and flourishing, something like that, flourishing of the people. And I mean, it could be interesting cases coming quite close to what you're looking for when it comes to, in terms of efficiency, but because you could imagine a state which is very efficient in distributing and even perhaps producing goods. But then you could imagine a state which is much better, but with more freedom, for example. And then you could,
Freedom of what?
I don't know,
Movement.
less enforcing state, a state which has less control. I mean, there could be a trade-off in terms of control of certain parameters
Yeah, true.
and freedom that leads directly to happiness. But then, of course, you have to define happiness in
It's
terms
true,
of some
yeah, I agree, yeah,
They
but
know
I-
It couldn't be completely
The correlation with
it couldn't be
happiness.
completely
Yeah,
Maybe I'm
I-
totally controlled and I'm happy.
I think it's I think it's a lot of kind of wisdom in this.
But I just repeat what he
Yeah,
says. But so I don't say anything new. I just say that.
It's the same colleague who basically she could not live here. Okay, she said that all this very well intended state, it has people pay price for this.
Yeah.
People don't communicate as much as they want. There is no, they don't invite each other. She was 2 years at the department. Not a single colleague invited her to a dinner party. You know, so there is a price that people pay for this, right? For this network being being so solid. You know, that even to kind of, I heard anyway, that offer kind of, or even question whether is everything okay. It's a kind of an insulting person because how come he could be, you know. Anyway, so people pay price. This is also well-being. Yeah, she ended in the end. She ended with depression, you know, and her best solution was to leave this, you know, beautiful state. But I mean, you know, I wish
And we
everyone.
have got used to it. So
I wish everyone had this kind of problems, you know. I mean, so to say. I mean, people are struggling, you know. If we look, I mean, there is how many? I don't want to lie, but I mean, those who live in poverty, which means 1.25. They're billions, you know. They're billions.
But
No,
if we're
this is
looking
a-
for optimal state, I mean,
Yeah, okay.
becomes
No, we are
interesting, yeah.
not. We are not. We are looking. We are kind of geared towards, this problem of,
Amartya Sen uses this kind of argument to argue for kind of socialistic state. But
Yeah.
so he tries to find measures of quality of life.
yeah.
I think there is a distinction between maybe welfare and well-being here. Right? Like the welfare state, like checked here, is to provide a minimal level of well-being. So maybe that has to do with the minimum.
Yeah, I mean, it
behavioral
is obviously it
conditions.
is very minimalistic in what we. I mean, not that minimalistic,
No.
but it is still. We are not looking at the optimal. We are not psychiatrists working on an optimal, of what makes people happy. Obviously, it's very subjective as well. You cannot. I mean, I don't think it's possible to
The state
make-
cannot provide happy marriages.
Yes.
I want to get back not only to Adam Smith but to Eleanor Ostrom. Okay, and so let's say the checks and balances of people when they are collectively active could include such things as trust. Okay, and trust in non-corruption, so to speak. Where has that gone in your survey?
Yeah,
You didn't talk about that at all.
No, we don't, because I mean, this concept is alien to the literature that we are building on, and we are strongly building on rational choice literature.
Why are you doing that?
Why we are doing that? Because these are the most accepted, right? And there is a lot of insight there, and this is. Logically, they are very coherent and plausible, and to be honest, the alternatives are not particularly strong, appealing. You said about market type of, my argument, my answer to you would be, and where are those groups of happy individuals living without state? I mean, when it comes to large groups, every big groups of individuals live in states. Do you know a large group of people who live happily ever after without a state?
Well, maybe it's a question of how strong the state needs to be.
Oh yeah, then you move this.
But of course, I mean, it's a legitimate move. If it's not, if it's not very strong, it's closer to free organizing.
Yeah.
So the more degrees of freedom you leave to the individuals and the sub-organizations, the more you're close to the Adam Smith. I mean, I don't think Adam Smith himself would have argued for a capitalist society without any restrictions. They all wanted some restrictions on the freedom of the companies. And
I think I have another suggestion here.
What?
That the evidence for voluntary infrastructure is actually everywhere in a sense. Because the thing is that when it works, the state takes over in the end. So there are a lot of examples of people building roads, people building a lot of these things, maybe even those irrigations that you talked about before. But when it becomes efficient enough or large enough, then the stronger state takes over. So we have this in Sweden. A lot of roads in Sweden are actually private roads that eventually will be run by the government. And we have a lot of these kind of...
that could have been the case in Egypt too.
Yeah.
Once these farmers, voluntarily started to build irrigation system, then there were some power-hungry individuals who saw a chance to.
I mean, the message, as I understood this, again, it's maybe completely wrong from Eleanor Ostrom research, is that it does work in small groups. Okay, collective action can be solved without an external agent in small groups. It doesn't work in big groups. Exactly, in small groups you have trust, you have built reputation, multiple interactions, and peer-to-peer monitoring, and again you can devise a system of punishment, and it is less convincing when it comes to execution, but even the threat works. But when it comes to large groups, this doesn't work. You need an external agent.
Okay, so then we have a counterexample in Sweden. we actually trust the police to a large extent. Why? Is it because we know that there's somebody else watching the police and who will punish them if they don't behave nicely? It could be. And in that case, your Leviathan argument is correct, probably. But I don't, what's your explanation? Because we
My
don't-
explanation is coming from Bura Stein. He said that the trust in this country came from the welfare state.
No, he's wrong.
Okay, but I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I find that the state.
No, it comes from the 19th century, from the education of the Swedish bureaucracy in Boström's philosophy of what's that, just and correct behavior and strong punishments if you didn't have that. That's
So it's a Leviathan.
den oväldige ämbetsmannen och ja, mycket starka, vad heter det, stränga straff om man inte gör vad man ska göra. And this was, they were able to take that over when they started building the, that's your argument again, they could take that over when they started building the welfare state. But so it's in a sense, but we do have collective trusts. So it's, well, maybe it's not a counterexample to you. It actually shows that trust can work on a collective level if it's backed up by a strong Leviathan who already has some good moral
Yes,
qualities.
but exactly. But in large groups, right? They without any mechanism of coordination from above, trust is not present. You know, so it is not self-sustained. You know, there are too many people to.
The Vikings didn't have a strong coordinated society. There were more bands and groups. But one thing that was very important for them was that if they shook hands and they gave their word, they had to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
They had no state, had they?
No, but this
Societies.
custom of going to the thing, you know what this, the you know the thing, and following the judgments there and keeping your word and commitment, those were all strong features.
Exactly. But how big were Vikings? I mean, we are talking about, again, if we talk about the size, it is not the modern state, modern day large collectives. It's a small
Probably
group.
still a few 100,000 people, probably anyway.
You cannot shake hands with all the people in Sweden to establish.
No, that's what I mean. So they they
Yeah.
went to this thing and they had these what do you call them? The lawmen reciting, and then they had collective judging, and well, there was not a strong Leviathan, but still they followed these norms.
Exactly. I mean, I don't see how I completely agree with you. From my point of view, it was a small group where they could shake hands.
I don't think so. I think we're talking about 100,000 people at least.
Exactly. It is.
You cannot shake 100,000 people.
No, but your mechanism of trust, right? Shaking hands presupposes that it is a face-to-face contact, and quite.
Okay, but I mean,
It's a group of people on a ship. I don't know. It's still quite a, you know. I mean, how to establish trust in Russia, right? Go around and shake hands with all my fellow citizens, and this will be the beginning of a big jolly.
You have to send the KGB and others to ethical school and punish them if they're not ethical. No, but there's a combination here of yeah.
What are the implications for the world? I'm thinking about, you know, I'm an accountant from the beginning, and we have something which is called accounting unit, and it always depends on if the individual or the group or the nation or or the world. Right now we have some sort of need of collective action because of the global warming, for
Yeah.
instance. What would this mean?
Yeah, it is a good question. Yeah, exactly, we face
Because
some,
it would-
as all humans on this planet, we also face it like climate change is a collective action,
Yeah,
and
and it means that we need to cooperate between countries and between states and
yes, exactly. I mean, if you follow this logic, yes, you have you need an external agent who is I don't know.
no.
We are cornered like the first the original civilization. We are cornered by the climate change.
But
It's not mountains and rivers, it's climate change. And then a Leviathan would race.
Would raise somewhere, yeah.
But are the basic assumptions correct that we all of us always would be free riders or acting
I mean,
in
you know,
our self-interest?
I mean, what I would like to do really,
Yes.
what I would like to do, like an ideal world, right? I would like to run the following experiment, just to announce in here in Gothenburg that the ticket conductors are off for the days on strike, and to check the revenues of the public transport. You know, this will be a real good test in this highly trusted society which knows which gets a lot for their taxes as well. So this is like
we like
quasi-voluntary.
to pay
Quasi-voluntary compliance is very high because of history, because of what people get, blah 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 blah. I would really like to see. It is obviously like, you know, it is a to support this argument, a theoretical notion. We don't have a clear-cut empirical evidence, but this would be ideal. And to be honest, how I came to this situation, they were on strike, you know, and I spoke with with our administrative staff something about this, and people say, of course I'm not going to swipe my card. Why? If there are no so, and this made me push me to think, you know. So this is a society which, again, you know, with all right values and feelings, you know, and still people, when they see the opportunity.
Let me give you another example. In Sweden, if you are walking in the forest or in nature in general, most people don't throw pieces of plastic and papers on the ground, even though it would be very convenient very often to do that. It goes with some more problems to put it in their pocket, and then they have to throw it in a waste paper basket when they get to one. Now in other countries here, Italy or somewhere, they throw those pieces of paper a lot more. Now, why is that so? I mean, and there's no Leviathan around watching you. The only one is inside here.
Oh, I mean, there could be a host of reasons, you know. I mean,
Yeah, but of course here we have a moral norm which has been somehow taken in, internalized
But
by a lot of them.
it has changed.
Is it worse nowadays?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot.
I would
Yes.
say.
So we have more immigrants.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
No,
easy
people
to
are
blame
still
immigrants.
getting the
But-
stuff from the streets. Plastic bags.
I mean, basically, the idea is when the opportunity is, if it is true again, if the dominant strategy is to free ride, when the opportunity arises, people switch it.
But I think in this case people don't.
Maybe it depends what they,
The empirical evidence is contradictory.
Well,
They have
still-
not for decades at least.
maybe
so-
what costs or what not costs. I mean, it costs to swipe a card and
No, but drive along a Swedish highway and see and compare it to an Italian highway.
Yeah.
But I think what will happen.
but also because you have someone that go around and take off the garbage from the street. So
No, but I mean,
but it's also
countryside road.
it's the countryside road.
Yeah,
It's the
sometimes.
I think
same.
this logic, like in your experiment, people they start wondering, oh, what if? Like Weber's logic on the slave, right? When the slave actually realizes that's like the condition of slave. So I think people will start thinking, well, what if I don't pay? What will happen? So then they see other people doing the same.
I mean,
so
what
they
other
decide-
people do, it's a big,
Exactly, exactly.
it isn't built in all this logic of collective action.
Sure.
It's, how your neighbor behaves, how
Yes.
your other fellow citizens
So that's a
behave.
much more abstract Leviathan.
By the way, you know, I really found this really interesting article by an Israeli social scientist. It's a paper about how the Israeli state authority was created. So they basically drew from Swedish experience. Namely, they published these books about people earnings, so that everyone can check, how much you earn and how much they earn and how much they paid. and then they can report to the state. Okay, so this is very important in the logical collective action, how your peers behave. If everybody pays bribes, you know, and why I should be the sucker, you know, why I should carry the cost. And so they wanted to this peer-to-peer monitoring kind of introduce to aid the state. But the point, it was a good idea, but they didn't have the Swedish capacity to do this. There were so many errors in the book that they ended in so many litigations that the whole project they abandoned, you know, because people were saying, no, I don't earn so much, you know. I mean, it is difficult for me to think about the, you know, I'm very much like, you know, into this, you know, development and, you know, business. So I'm really looking at, there is quite enough of people in poverty and living really in bad conditions, you know. So whether democracy and brings everything that we want, you know, for these people. So this is I'm kind of at the, I'm limited at the national, at the states as a unit of analysis, not at the global level. I'm afraid I cannot offer anything smart or inspirational.
Anyway, we're coming to the end of this, but I think it's one thing I do agree with you, that you're actually asking interesting and important questions, as distinct from some people in political science,
yes,
who only measure the voting preferences, etc., that I always found mostly narcissistic. It's sort of, you know, they're sort of being, I don't know, going for the narcissism of the politicians, the journalists, and probably also themselves, because they get to be on TV and comment. But this is much better. This is much more interesting. So, of course, we see here that there are, I think, limitations in this prisoner's dilemma.
Course, yeah.
And I think, you know, there are other things you could do. You could look at the role of norms and conventions without Leviathan and so on. And let me just end by saying this: next week we will continue our critical discussion, I hope, of the prisoner's dilemma derived theories. I didn't know that you were going to talk about that. But next week we're going to have a guy here from Stockholm who's going to try to propose to us that language arises through usage of prisoner's dilemma models. And then later on in this spring we'll have another talk also by Ulf, who will talk about also some other approaches of prisoner's dilemma. So it was very nice for you to come here, and
thank you for your interesting comments.
Yeah, we like this.
Yeah, really challenging as I expected.
Let's see what happens.